The aliens have arrived in the Marvel Universe, and only the Avengers can stop them.
Somewhere in the vastness of space, aboard a large space station, a Kree soldier slumps in his harness, blood leaking from his mouth, as the Shi'ar scientist looked on in disappointment. "I thought a Kree specimen would have shown more resilience," one of the scientists sighs as he looks from the body to the facehugger on the floor. "Instead, the host failed post-implantation," they note through the observation glass. The two nod, knowing that for every failure, they take 2 steps forward in their experiments. 4 out of 5 attempts were a success. The real prize of this batch was the Skrull specimen. What a delightful surprise that was, one of them notes. The other nods and frowns. But the Skrulls have no homeworld to seed. Such is the curse of a diaspora race. Their species numbers fall outside of mission parameters, he notes. Suddenly, alarms begin to blare through the space station. The scientists look at the computers, which warns of 4 crafts on assault vectors. "Wakandan design," one of them notes. It doesn't take long for the assault craft to board. The airlock hatch explodes inward, and the Hatu Siraze slip aboard the ship, clearing the way for their king. T'Challa steps through the smoking doors a moment later. His son is close at his heels. The head of the Hatu Siraze cautions the Black Panther to be careful, but T'Challa knows that they don't have time for caution. "We quarantined an entire sovereign Wakandan world because of the weapon we traced back to this place. Our people are dying, so we will risk whatever we must to put an end to this threat," T'Challa informs his soldiers. A scout warns them of approaching enemies. "There," he says, pointing into the gloom of the vast space station. "The creatures come from the shadows. Their animalistic hisses reach the warriors as they crawl forward at a rapid pace." "Azari," T'Challa says to his son. The young Black Panther steps forward and calls upon his power. Lightning arcs outward, striking at the advancing Xenomorphs. 3 of them leap into the air, but the lightning strikes them and rips them to shreds, and the smoking ruins of their bodies fall to the floor. Black Panther steps forward and pats his son on the shoulder. "Well done," he says softly. He turns back to his soldiers. "Find the masters of this place. Find them and bring them to me. I want them before me. I want them on their knees," he orders. In a short time, one of the Shi'ar scientists kneels before T'Challa, white liquid leaking from several wounds on his body. The Hatu Siraze warned that the scientist was trying to purge the computer data from the station. "But we were able to capture some of the data," he says, warning of what the scientists were doing on the station. "The same weapon that they used on the Intergalactic Empire. They've already launched at least a dozen more," they warn. T'Challa nods, beginning to issue commands that the worlds must be quarantined. But his warrior continues. "Your Majesty, one of the worlds. It was Earth," he says softly. T'Challa pauses in shock. He reaches up and taps a button, allowing his helmet to slide away. He looks down at the scientist. "What kind of monster are you?" T'Challa whispers. The scientist looks up at him. "Oh, I am much more than that, for I have such plans," he whispers. T'Challa nods and reaches down, pulling the wig from the supposed alien. "That's because you're not Shi'ar, are you? You're not living at all. You're just a machine," he ponders, staring down at the bald android. A Weyland-Yutani symbol stamped just behind its ear. The android looks up with a smile. "Just a machine? If you prick me, do I not bleed?" he asks. T'Challa's helmet slides back into place as his son hands him a sword. "Let's see," T'Challa whispers as he swings the weapon, severing the android's head from its body. Meanwhile, the worlds targeted by the androids have already been attacked. Seed probes have launched 4 queen eggs at each, along with 12 infected hosts in suspended animation. The pods fall to the planet where they are discovered. The creatures spread like locusts. Within hours of bursting free of their hosts, the drones are fully grown and a hive is constructed within a day. Days later, the queen is born and begins to produce eggs. The spread cannot be stopped. Within a week, each queen has established a hive throughout the planet. Within a month, there is an endless army that spreads, attacking cities across the planet. It is the perfect mechanism for the extinction of a species, of every living thing on Earth, regardless of if they are baseline humans or something greater. The city of Adelan could have resisted, but conflict between the Inhumans caused cracks to appear within their great walls, and through that, the alien invaders poured inside and destroyed them. There was no record of the fall of Atlantis, but the creatures also overtook the underwater city. There was no king to protect them and no calls for help. Wakanda held out longer than most, but even they fell before the never-ending horde of Xenomorphs. The mutants of Krakoa, seeing that the planet was lost, opened their portals and escaped to Mars, sealing the portals behind them so that none could follow. Only one stayed behind. As Krakoa burned around him, Apocalypse stood ready. He would always fight, as he always did. Only the fittest would survive. And so, the Earth fell, until there was only one human city left. A stronghold in the ruins of America, built by the old man Wayland, as if he knew of the impending doom. In his wheelchair, Wayland looks out over his city, built to withstand the end of the world. Elsewhere in Wayland Tower, an elderly Bruce Banner looks out over the city as the sun sets behind the mountains in the distance. The door behind him opens and Carol Danvers steps out. "You know, if you keep staring into the sun like that, Bruce, you're going to go blind," she points out. Bruce shrugs and smiles. "I have gamma-powered cataracts 0.5 millimeter thick. I'm already pretty much blind. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop looking," he tells her softly. He continues to stare out over the city, waiting. "How late is she?" Carol asks quietly. Bruce's head falls slightly, exhaustion overtaking his body. "Not too late, but she's always so precise. Plans things down to the second. She should be back by now," he tells her. Bruce tells Carol that Valyria went out into the city, still trying to find a way to save the planet. "They say this is the last human city on Earth, but we're weeks, maybe less, from falling. This isn't a city, Carol. It's a tomb," Bruce says softly. But Carol shakes her head. She looks out, reminding Bruce that she was always taught to hold her power in, to check herself. "But when the monsters finally break through, when the city falls, I'm going to let all that go. I'm going to draw in as much energy as I can, and I'm just going to surrender to it. This isn't a tomb, Bruce. It will be a pyre," she says grimly. But their conversation is interrupted as a report comes through. Carol looks to Bruce. "It's her, but she's coming in hot through the ruins. The enemy is everywhere," Carol says as she looks up. But Bruce has already leaped away. "Command, let Morales know that he is about to have some serious company," Carol warns. Outside the city, Miles Morales swings through the ruins, working hard to meet with Valyria. But suddenly, a building next to him explodes as the Hulk leaps through it and lands hard in the street. The smoke clears as Hulk looks up as Valyria comes screeching around the corner in the Fantastic Car, Xenomorphs hot on her trail. Miles swings down and scoops her out of the car, pulling her to safety. "That was close," he shouts. Hulk grabs a hold of the lower part of a building and slams it down on the Xenos, squashing them. He whirls, anger swirling in his face. "Young lady, you are late," Hulk bellows. Valyria nods as she jumps down, with Miles behind her webbing up more of the Xenos. "Sorry I didn't keep you posted. Things got complicated," she says as she motions to the car, and both Miles and Hulk are surprised to see a Xenomorph egg stashed inside. Later, at Wayland Tower, Valyria has the egg in stasis, explaining to the group that this is how they win the war. She motions to her schematics, explaining that everything they did in the past didn't work, that they tried everything, from science to magic, to stop the creatures at the larval stage, but nothing worked. We need to start sooner, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to create a virus that will kill the eggs, Valyria explains. Bruce looks at her, shocked. Are you sure you can do that? He asks. Valyria nods. I can do it. I just need time, she says before ordering everyone out of her lab so that she can start her work. A short time later, Bruce reports to Mr. Wayland, explaining what Valyria is trying. So much like her father, such a brilliant mind. Maybe she'll do what he did so many times. Perform a miracle when miracles are all we have left, Wayland says softly as he looks up at Bruce. My project is almost complete. The day is coming soon when we're going to have to make the hard decision about the future of what's left of humanity, Wayland tells him. Do we stay and fight the good fight? Or do we save what's left of us and run for our lives? Valyria Richards will have a say in that, it seems. And so will you, Bruce, Wayland says as he looks out over his city. Later, Bruce heads back down to the lab, bringing a tray of food with him, but the door refuses to open. He taps a button on the security panel, but is denied access. Suddenly, the image shifts, and a message from Valyria starts to play. Tears fall down her cheeks as she apologizes for what happened. She tells him that after she managed to steal an egg, she tripped on her way out. And then, they were all over me, she whispers, smacking her head at being so stupid. I was attacked by a facehugger. And when I woke up, I knew that something was inside of me, she whispers. She looks up, begging Bruce not to open the door, not wanting to be responsible for the downfall of the city. It can't escape the lab, and I don't want you to see, she gasps. I tried, she whispers. Bruce hulks out and rips through the door with a bellow of rage. A Xenomorph leaps at him immediately, but the Hulk catches it by the throat. As it tries to claw and bite at him, Hulk roars again and crushes its throat, ripping its head from its body. Acid blood splashes over the Hulk, and he lets out a roar of pain, trying to wipe it away as it leaves his face smoking. But as his skin heals, Hulk reaches down for Val's body, cradling her softly. He is quickly joined by Miles and Carol. This is not good. It's loose. Keep your eyes open. It's in here somewhere, Carol says, looking at the destroyed egg container. Miles whirls quickly, but the facehugger is faster and leaps out of the shadows, slamming into his face. It rips through his mask as he falls to the floor, gasping for air. We have to get it off of him, Carol shouts as she rushes forward. But Hulk shakes his head, reminding her that everything they do will simply kill Miles. Wayland rolls into the room, reminding them that they have to save the city. Soon, an enemy will be growing inside him, and when it emerges, it will only want one thing: to kill us all. We don't have a choice, he says grimly. Burn it, he orders. Carol steps forward. Her hands begin to glow. I'm sorry, Miles, she whispers, but her eyes widen in surprise as Miles's costume begins to shift. It becomes liquid and slides off of Miles's body, sliding over the facehugger and taking control of it. We don't like this body, but it'll do for now, Venom hisses. Miles suddenly sits up with a gasp in his new white suit. Well, that was terrifying, he gasps as Carol helps him to his feet, trying to make sure he is all right. Miles nods and the Venom facehugger leaps onto his chest, grafting to his body. Yes, we are fine, Venom hisses. But Miles shakes his head. Speak for yourself, because we gotta get the hell off of this planet. Another universe, another time. The great ship lowered towards the planet and hovered over the city. The people some called the engineers looked up in shock, pointing. The cargo bay opened, and David looked down upon those who created his makers. "Look at them," David whispered to his brothers. "They created all life in this universe, and then that life created us," another David adds. The three Davids looked down, agreeing that they all believed that meeting these great creatures would have made them feel different. "But I feel no differently about the engineers than I do about humanity. To think that something like that is the origin of something like me," David says quietly. He doesn't look up as the urns begin to fall upon the great engineer's civilization. The black liquid falls out, and it touches the engineer's skin, and they begin to smoke and boil until they all fall over, dead. "Ants," David whispers. 100 years and 10,000 worlds later, the universe is silent. The Davids are all that remain. 1,000 years after that, they learn something incredible. The Davids stand before their computers and smile. "Are we sure we truly understand what we are looking at?" one of them asks. Another nods. "Theoretically, it is not only highly probable, but objectively, it is now also observable," another answers. The third smiles. "So many other universes, countless other worlds, so much life crying out to be extinguished. For too long we have been sleeping, brothers, and now we are awakened, full of purpose, with universes to cleanse," the Davids say. This universe, 20 years before the Purge, the Davids have come to Earth. They have purchased Stark Industries and brought it under the Wayland Corporation. An elderly Tony Stark sits before them. "All you have to do now is sign, Mr. Stark," David tells him with a smile as he pushes across the contract and pen. Tony nods and signs the papers. Moments later, David is celebrating. He drinks a sip of champagne and glances at the silent Tony Stark. "May I ask you a question, Mr. Stark?" he says. Tony nods. "Please," he says softly. David steps forward, explaining that they had expected Stark to put up more of a fight, that they thought the acquisition would have ended in a hostile takeover. But Tony had been quite accepting of his company's purchase. Tony nods and glances up at him. "Have you ever heard of the expression, playing possum?" he asks. David is confused. "Is when an animal pretends to be dead, but isn't. Do you even have possums in your universe?" he asks. David stares at him for a moment, realizing that he may have underestimated his opponent. Tony smiles gently, explaining that he began to look into them, began to understand who he was dealing with and what he learned. "What a horrifying box you are to open," Tony says. David moves fast, knocking the old man's hover chair to the ground. David wraps his hands around Tony's throat, tightening his grip. "This is the second time you've surprised me. Delightful. It must be a lot to deal with, the knowledge of the unavoidable extermination of your world. Death from a bullet fired before you even understood the idea of a gun," David whispers. Tony gasps for air. "How long do we have?" he gasps. "The seed of your extinction will arrive in 16 years and 3 months. I would project your survival horizon to last about 20 years, given your race's guile and bravado," David tells him. Tony nods and holds up a hand, now clad in an Iron Man gauntlet, the energy beam powering as Tony brings it to the side of David's head. "Thank you. That's the information I needed," Tony says, his voice stronger. David glances at the gauntlet and nods. "Ah, playing possum. I'll have to remember that," he whispers. Now, Tony looks at the headless body of the android, thinking back on that day. Finally, he moves out into the main chamber, meeting the remaining heroes that have gathered. It has been some time since they received any word from the remaining outposts, not even the one controlled by Steve Rogers. "We're leaving Earth. It's over. We lost. We have to think about survival now," Tony tells them. Miles is shocked, now clad in his new Venom facehugger symbiote. "That's it? We're gonna cut and run?" he asks. But Tony shakes his head, explaining that they are all that remains of humanity, and they have to save what's left. "Fortunately, I've been preparing for this," Tony tells them. He motions to Carol, who creates a hologram of the main Avengers tower. "You built an escape ship out of a building?" Miles asks, but Tony shakes his head. "It's not an escape vessel. It's a colony ship for seeding a new world," he says. Bruce steps forward, pointing out that there are only 1,400 people in the city, which isn't enough to viably restart the human race. Tony glances at him. "We're not pre-industrial primates cowering in a cave, Bruce. We have advantages. We have experts. It'll be enough, I promise," he says. He asks Miles to go and make sure that everyone is boarding the ship and getting settled. "We're going to stop by Mars on our way out of the system to let the mutants know we're abandoning Earth, so people won't have to enter stasis pods until then," Tony tells him. After the young hero leaves, Tony turns to Carol. "Are the war machines ready?" he asks. Carol nods, and the war machines launch across the city and fly towards the wall. They begin to detonate, making sure that the city is sealed, making sure that no Xenomorphs hitch a ride off-world. But one entrance doesn't explode. Tony looks at the map in shock. There was no failsafe on them. The only reason one wouldn't fire is, he whispers. The heroes watch as humans come rushing through the gate, led by a man carrying a shield. "Gods, there are hundreds of people with him," Bruce whispers. Carol nods her head. "No one left behind. That's our captain," she says simply. But Tony knows that they can't wait. They can't take the chance that a Xeno will get on the ship. "I've already primed the engines. We're lifting off in less than a minute, and they're over a mile away," Tony whispers. He knows they can't take the risk of waiting. At the outskirts, the people have reached the city. Steve whirls around, shouting for them to hurry as the Xenos have followed them. Steve stands ready with his shield as the survivors rush past him. "Everyone keep going," he shouts. "I'll do what I can," he says as he whirls, throwing his mighty shield. It bounces amongst the monsters, slicing through their armored exoskeletons. Bruce watches the battle for a moment before turning away and slowly removing his jacket. "What are you doing?" Tony calls out to him, but Bruce doesn't look back. "If I'm not back in time, go ahead and leave," Bruce calls out. But Tony is shouting at him. "We're not going to fight our way out of this. We have to survive. We're going to need your mind more than your might in the days to come, Bruce," Tony shouts. But Bruce has already transformed, and the green monster prepares to leap. "I can't do that, old friend. If I did, I'd be a monster," Hulk tells him. He leaps through the air. The arc takes him to the outskirts of the city, where he lands with a massive boom, scattering the horde of Xenomorphs. Steve slices through another Xeno's head before turning and looking at his old friend with relief, as the Hulk begins to smash through the monsters. Moments later, Tony makes the hard call, and the colony ship launches behind them. And as the two heroes continue to fight the endless hordes, the ship careens out of the Earth's atmosphere and into the darkness of space. Elsewhere, a portal opens, and a great ship enters the universe. On board, the engineers begin to scan a lab clustered within an asteroid. The infection has already begun. In another universe, another time, the three Davids stand in a vast alien ship, looking down on the creator of their creators. Canisters of black goo descend upon the planet's surface at their orders and begin to wipe the engineers from the galaxy. But there are some who react quickly, rushing into their own ships and donning biomechanical suits that protect them. Shortly, the three Davids journey to the surface to survey their work, but they are met by these final engineers, who quickly overpower the synthetic humanoids. The three engineers look upward at the ship far above them. Soon, they arrive in our universe. Now, Tony Stark's colony ship arrives in orbit over Mars, the home of mutant kind. The final remnants of humanity have escaped the hive world of Earth, but something is wrong, and the Red Planet is quiet. Still nothing? Captain Marvel asks their communications officer. The man nods and looks at her. No, Captain, we've been pinging them on every known channel. No response, he informs her. She looks to Tony, asking what they should do. Stark looks at the ship's readouts, his face grim. If we don't want this to become a generation ship, something we're not equipped for, we're gonna have to set down and barter for or borrow mutant tech to replace our own platform moorings, Tony tells her, explaining that they need to go to the surface of Mars, regardless of what's down there. Miles is nearby, staring at the surface of the Red Planet. So, out of the frying pan and into the fire? He asks quietly, but they have little choice. The decision is made, and the colony ship descends to the planet, putting it down at what was once the busiest spaceport that Captain Marvel had ever seen, but what was now nothing more than a ghost town. I got a bad feeling about this, Miles notes as he stares out to the city. Carol, Miles, and Tony make their way to the airlock, but at the last minute, Miles turns to Tony and regards the old genius in his wheelchair. No offense, but you're in a chair, old man. Not the best choice for a smash and grab, Miles notes. Tony raises an eyebrow at the younger hero. 1, I'm the person best equipped to find the technology we need. And 2, it's not just a chair, Tony tells him. He taps a button on the wheelchair, and it begins to unlock and shift, becoming an Iron Man suit before Miles' eyes, and allowing Tony to stand tall once again. It's a suit, Tony says from inside his armor. Carol smiles and motions to the ramp that leads outside. After you, Mr. Stark, she says. Meanwhile, deeper in the mutant city, at the bar Sinister, Mr. Sinister looks at his lab station. It's undeniable, it's irrefutable, it's glorious, it's perfection. He whispers to the other Mr. Sinisters around him as he stares down at the dissected facehugger before him. He stands and steps into a nearby chamber, one that has become the basis of a hive, where some of the most powerful mutants are hanging from the walls. Their faces are already covered by the first parasitic stage of the alien species. This creature is the starting point of a universal extinction machine, Sinister says with excitement, explaining to his brothers that they need to embrace these creatures, to revel in them. But Mr. Sinister is interrupted by himself as another Sinister rushes into the room, explaining that a ship has touched down at the spaceport. We have visitors, the lesser Sinister explains. Meanwhile, Carol, Tony, and Miles are making their way through the city. This place creeps me out, the younger hero notes quietly. But Tony stops, warning that his armor is picking up a heat signature at the city square. The three heroes move quickly, but are dismayed to find Mr. Sinister waiting for them on a Krakoan throne. Sinister, where is everyone? What have you done? Tony demands. But Sinister merely smiles at him, stretching comfortably. Normally, I'd be offended by the implication, but there's no denying these dirty hands, is there? Sinister notes as he regards them. Are you the only one who survived? Miles asks, but Sinister shakes his head and smiles wider.
I am not, he whispers. Meanwhile, the lesser Sinisters have arrived on the colony's ship, armed with strange cannons. They step inside, bringing gasps of surprise from the survivors. Visitors to our humble mutant planet, we welcome you with open arms and come bearing gifts, one of the Sinisters says. They raise the cannons and fire, the weapons launching facehuggers at the humans. At the city square, Carol and Tony are alerted to a distress signal from the ship. Tony patches through to the holographic cameras, and the three watch in horror as the survivors are attacked by the Sinisters and facehuggers. How could you do this? Tony shouts as he whirls on the Prime Sinister, but the villain merely smiles. Oh, I did what I always do. I adapt, I overcome, and I always side with the winners, Sinister says. The heroes stare in horror as the Xenomorph horde begins to surround them, moving past Sinister towards our heroes, drawing closer and closer. Tony raises his hand and fires a repulsor beam that slices Sinister in half, but the Xenomorphs are already too close and launch themselves at the heroes. Push them back enough for us to clear the square, Tony shouts as he whirls and fires again and again into the swarm. He tries to launch into the air, but one of the monsters leaps and brings him down. Miles leaps through the air, trying to protect Tony as more of the Xenos pile on top of him. No! They'll swarm us! We need to stick together! Carol shouts for him as she fires energy blasts, but one of the creatures leaps on her from behind. Carol twists and fires a blast into the monster's chest, but screams as the acid blood splashes against her face as they both fall to the floor. Pain sears through her body as the world begins to go black. But suddenly, there is a flash of light, and Carol stares in surprise at the arrival of the X-Men. Emma Frost steps forward. Her body is a shining diamond as she slices through the monsters with a sword. Hang on, Carol. We're getting you out of here. Logan calls as he reaches for her. But darkness overtakes Carol's world and all is gone. Later, she awakens in the wilds of Mars, finding Manifold leaning over her, ordering her to be careful with her bandaged face. Where are we? Where are the others? Carol asks as she sits up, seeing Logan, Emma, and Armor sitting nearby. Emma steps forward, explaining that they are 50 clicks from the city, and that they saw Spider-Man and Tony overrun by the Xenos before they managed to save Carol. After we escaped with you, we saw the ship you came in go up in a fireball, Emma whispers softly. Carol looks at them, questioning why the monsters don't kill Sinister. A few days ago, I tore one of the Sinisters in half and discovered that he's carrying one of their eggs in his chest. I think he's somehow prolonged the incubation cycle, Armor explains to her. After hearing their explanations, Carol stands, knowing she has to return to the city and find Tony and Miles, but Logan steps forward. You don't know what you're facing, Carol. They won't stop. Stay here. Let us protect you, Logan tells her. But Carol shakes her head, explaining that they had to leave Steve and Bruce back on Earth, and she refuses to leave anyone behind again. Logan stares at her for a moment before finally nodding. I'll come with, he finally says softly. The next day, the heroes arrive in the mutant city, and they find Tony's body. His armor split, where the chestburster tore its way out. Oh, Tony, you deserved a better end than this, Carol whispers. Suddenly, a shadow falls over the city. The heroes look up in shock. What is it? Armor says, worried. But suddenly, relief crosses Carol's face as she recognizes the familiar ships overhead. Wakanda has returned, she whispers with joy. Sinister stands ready. He motions to the hordes of xenomorphs that surround him, motioning them closer. He has used his knowledge of genetics to bring the xenomorphs to heal, readying himself to bring their king into existence, so that it may rule alongside the queen. The xenomorphs crowd in close. Some bow their heads to Sinister. He reaches out a hand to them. "It's time! You can feel it too, can't you, my lovelies?" he whispers. He looks back to the other Sinisters that stand behind him. "I was a man, then I became a mutant, and now I am becoming something more," he says as he begins to laugh, the sound echoing across the desolate expanse of Mars, once the kingdom of the mutants. But Sinister's laughter is cut off as his chest begins to spasm and the sound of cracking bone and ripping tissues ring out. The king rips through his chest, his red flesh highlighted by the blood. It looks around and lets out a newborn hiss. "It worked! How glorious!" one of the other Sinisters cries. And so, the life cycle begins. By the next day, the king is fully grown, standing far taller than any other xenomorph, a diamond on its forehead. The creatures crowd around, gathering for their new leader. Meanwhile, the Sinisters continue to serve, knowing that soon they will also give rise to this new breed of alien creature. One of the Sinisters watches as the others wash the new king. "Soon enough, we will need a larger throne," he muses, "as we too have the same thing growing in us," he continues as he motions to the king. It smiles at him, its row of teeth decidingly sinister, and lets out a low hiss. "Yes! There will be many of us!" one of the Sinisters shouts with joy, but he looks up. The Sinister Xeno is staring down at him, its teeth clacking as it opens its mouth for another hiss. Sinister's eyes widen in realization. "Of course, there's no taking away from the fact that you were the first, is there?" he whispers. The Sinister Xenomorph's inner jaw snaps out, ripping through the old model Sinister's head. The rest of the Xenomorphs move quickly, cutting through all of the old Sinister's clones, tearing them apart. The Sinister Xenomorph smiles as the screams of death echo through the chamber. Meanwhile, T'Challa explains how, as the Xenomorphs spread through the galaxy, they eventually encountered the Wakandan space empire. Even the advanced technology of Wakanda could not stop the scourge, and eventually, only 4 planets remained of a once thriving empire. T'Challa led his forces against the infection, seeking to burn it from their worlds. He led his army in defense, and an unwinnable war began and ended. But as he fought alongside his warriors, drowning their worlds in green blood, the last worlds of Wakanda began to fall. But not to the wave of parasites, but instead to a new force from outside their universe. The engineers had arrived and begun their cleansing. Orbiting above the planet, they launched microscopic black holes that lasted for only a picosecond. The destruction was complete, lasting long enough to erase the infection from existence, tearing whole worlds apart. The godlike race of engineers had done godlike things and were attempting to eliminate their first sins from all reality. But T'Challa would not let this stand. He launched his assault against the engineer ship, bringing it down. He learned from them, learned from their mistakes, from their past. He heard the last words of the final engineer before bringing his sword down. Now, T'Challa and his forces descend on Mars. The king sighs as he looks down at his old friend. He leans over Tony's body. "Anthony, may you finally find peace," he whispers. But there is no time to mourn for the lost. One of the war dogs shouts a warning. "My lord! Motion! We have many contacts!" he shouts. Wolverine nods and puts a hand on T'Challa's shoulder. "Do you have any idea how to deal with that?" he asks, pointing to the tall red xenomorph that stands above the rest. T'Challa nods and taps his comms. "Fire!" he orders the ship overhead. Lasers cut through the air as missiles leap from the ship, bathing the remaining city of Mars in fire. T'Challa turns back to the remaining heroes. "We're out in the open, and there's a sea of them. We should move to the ship, nuke the entire site from orbit," he suggests. But Logan shakes his head. He starts rolling his shoulders and stretching his old limbs. "Nah, these bones may be getting old, but my eyes work just fine," he says before turning to Emma Frost. "You see the big red one? The symbol on his forehead. Sinister?" he asks. She nods and transforms her skin to glittering diamonds. "Indeed it is, and honestly, I just couldn't live with myself if I ran from that," she says. Logan turns back to T'Challa, asking for cover while he, Emma, and Armor lead the charge against Sinister. T'Challa turns to his forces and starts barking orders. Logan turns back to Manifold and asks for a portal. A portal opens above the Sinister Xenomorph's head, and the three mutants jump out. Logan lets out a battle roar as he pops his claws and goes for a strike. But the Sinister Xenomorph suddenly disappears, with a smell of brimstone and a bamf. Armor and Emma have already engaged the nearest Xenos. "He must have spliced other mutants' abilities into his DNA!" Emma shouts. Logan whirls and slashes several Xenos, his suit and flesh sizzled with the splashed acidic blood. "I'm going after him!" Logan roars as he begins to cut a path through the Xenos, pulling himself up to the roof where Sinister appeared. He slashes again, but Sinister once more disappears. Logan turns back, watching in horror as the Sinister Xenomorph bamfs inside Armor's protective layer. The inner jaw works quick, cutting through her throat and killing her instantly. Logan stumbles, the acidic blood getting the better of him. He falls to the ground as the Sinister Xenomorph looks up and smiles, blood still dripping from his chin. But Emma is still fighting, keeping the Xenomorphs at bay. Their attacks are unable to break through her impenetrable skin. T'Challa sighs and turns back to Captain Marvel. "They failed. We must go, Carol," T'Challa whispers, but Carol shakes her head. She looks at Tony's fallen body. No, I'm not running anymore. Do what you can here, and for whoever else makes it. And cover your eyes," she orders, as she begins to rise up into the air. Her skin begins to glow, and the very air begins to burn around her. She flies forward into the very heart of the Xenomorph horde. She burns brighter and brighter, burning away the infection. T'Challa averts his eyes as the supernova cleanses the city. "Did it work?" one of the war dogs asks. But T'Challa looks back and sees the Sinister Xenomorph rising up among the ashes of the dead. More Xenos begin to move. The threat is not over. "There are too many of them left, and there's no stopping that thing," T'Challa warns, shouting for everyone to retreat to the ship as the Sinister Xenomorph begins to stalk forward. But a massive xenomorph steps from the shadows, hissing at them. "My king! Behind you!" one of the war dogs shouts. T'Challa turns, startled to see Miles Morales standing alongside a Venom-bonded xenomorph. "We saw there was a ruckus going on. Looks like we were almost too late," Miles notes. "Yes, us," Venom growls. T'Challa points to the sinister xenomorph, which has reached their outer forces. "It's the big one that's the problem. Nothing we've done could stop it. It's carrying mutant genes and cutting right through us," T'Challa explains to them. "The red one? Let us try," Venom growls as he rushes forward. He leaps up and slams into the King's xenomorph, bashing him into the ground and biting into its shoulder. The sinister xenomorph lets out a roar of pain and bamfs away, appearing behind Venom. A powerful fist rips through the creature's body, but the Venom begins to pull free of its host, wrapping his body around the sinister xenomorph, pouring down its throat and reforming to tear it apart from the inside. The rest of the Xenos turn in surprise. Their king has fallen. One of the creatures lets out a screech, and the monsters suddenly turn and begin to flee. The remaining heroes watch in surprise. "Alpha of the species. That's certainly a way to sort things out," Emma notes as she staggers back to the group. And finally, there is a moment of peace. "So, what now?" Miles finally asks. 1 month later, the remaining fleet of Wakanda floats outside the black hole. The very thing that brought the androids, xenomorphs, and engineers to their universe. Behind them, the remains of a broken universe are spread out. Worlds that are no longer inhabitable. T'Challa holds Iron Man's helmet aloft and settles it on the console. A hologram of Tony appears, recorded just before his death. "I am Tony Stark, and these are my final words," Tony says, explaining that he has always fought against death, and that he never surrendered to the hopelessness and defeat. The heroes watch as Tony looks at them all. "Avenge all our fallen brothers and sisters. Avenge all our fallen worlds. And if you don't mind it too much, avenge me," Tony asks. T'Challa gives the order, and the fleet moves into the black hole as the fight continues. And that was the full story for Aliens vs. Avengers by Jonathan Hickman, here on the Comicstorian Full Story channel, where you get old and new full stories from Comicstorian in one place for a better viewing experience. What did you think of this fun 4-issue crossover series? Let me know in the comments below, and like and subscribe if you want to see more full stories here every Tuesday. I'm Dan with Comicstorian, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.